Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Marc Cohn, and I'm with the Open-O project. And this talk is going to be quite a contrast from the last talk, which is at the bottom end of the stack. We're going to talk about the top end of the stack, open orchestration. And I'm going to offer this presentation with my co-presenter, Chris Donley, who is the TSC chair for the Open-O project as well. So today what we want to talk about is to provide a vision statement for the problems that we intend to address with open orchestration. We also want to introduce the Open-O project at a very brief level. And then we'd like to share details on the architecture as well as the development status as we work toward our initial release. So first, I wanted to provide a reference point, which is the ETSI NFV architectural framework. And this, of course, is the management and orchestration, or ETSI MANO, which is a big part of the ETSI architectural activities. And when we wanted to address orchestration, we didn't want to simply look at the life cycle of VNFs and the management of VNFs, which is what MANO is all about. What we wanted to do is to address the broader picture. So there are some other areas that are involved in that. The first one is we need to integrate with the back-end systems of the major telecommunication operators. And this includes the operational support systems and the basic support systems, or business support systems rather, that are actually used to operate the carrier services, carrier customer relationships, and the overall carrier operations. Second, we needed to address portals, or a UI, because we're now in the cloud era with dynamic services that are initiated by end users and managed by those end users, and we needed to be much more attentive to how the end user engages, the whole user experience, than we would have ordinarily, where in the past operators actually had that responsibility. And then finally, in addition to MANO, we need to deal with connectivity services. And of course, SDN is a big part of NFV and an enabler for NFV. So we needed to also factor in how NFV engages with and integrates with SDN. But of course, SDN isn't the real challenge. The installed base is the real challenge. So we needed to deal with legacy networks as well. And that's going to involve integrating with a lot of existing management systems, as you'll see. And then finally, we needed a design time environment. And what's that all about? Well, there needs to be a way to create services and do it in a way that are actually not involving too much software development. That's what the model-driven automation is actually doing to transform the service delivery lifecycle. It's actually creating an ability and offering an ability for operators to differentiate their services using, without having to create new software for every service they intend to deliver. So what the problem space for open orchestration is to really deal with all of this. It's to deal with how we're going to address providing end-to-end services through a model-driven framework so that we can address not only NFV, but address SDN as well, legacy network services as well, and then do it in a way that it allows us to adapt the overall platform into operator environments. So we need to have some level of choice in terms of the underlying infrastructure and open source components and even proprietary components that we may need to integrate with where we're sitting at the orchestration layer. And that's why when we talk about Open-O, we start to think about any service over any network. It's the idea of providing end-to-end services across an NFV infrastructure as well as SDN and legacy network services. That's the target of the project. So way back at the beginning of the year, in February, we announced the intent to form a new open source project within the Linux Foundation called Open-O. The formation took place just a few months later, actually the first week of June to be exact, where a number of organizations got together in China, as it turns out, and then we actually created the structure for the project and then signed up new members, and off we were running. Our first release is only within 6 months of that initial formation. We're targeting the end of the year. We're on track, as you'll see in a minute, towards the initial Open-O release. And recognizing that Open-O, being an orchestration platform and a highly open orchestration platform, needs to integrate with a whole range of different systems, as you'll see in a moment. We also have been striking up liaisons with most of the key industry partners in the open SDN and NFV community. And this includes NFE, of course, for the NFE Architecture, the MEF with their LSO, or Lifecycle Services Orchestration, for SDN and connectivity services. The open SDN controllers, of course, Open Daylight is a big part of what we're doing. Openstack as our Vim, or Virtualized Infrastructure Manager, Juju as our VNF Manager. And then, of course, we need to be able to integrate with OPNFV and work with organizations like ONF and ETSI and MEF to be able to address the big picture issues so that we can integrate into the broader environment. And Open-O, at this point, has 13 members. I'm showing these members a little differently than you might think about them, and that is to really put a spotlight on the fact that we're really a global project. And even the organizations who you might think of being constrained to a particular geography are actually providing resources across the globe within their internal organizations. And the other thing you'll notice with our premier members is that we have 3 operators. And these operators have been signed up front from the beginning. They participated, and they are providing a great deal of direction as we undertake not only creating a new open source project, but also evolving the methodology to address open source for large-scale deployment by telecommunication operators. We have 5 general members as well, and they span the globe in addition to our premier members. And the membership is actually very active in terms of promoting Open-O, but also being able to commit a significant number of developers, as Chris is going to point out in just a minute. And then the next thing I want to talk about is the role of the Linux Foundation. Why would this group of organizations, specifically some of the world's largest operators, some of the world's largest OEMs, come to the Linux Foundation to create a new open source project? Well, I think this audience knows as well as anyone. I mean, first is neutrality. We needed to make sure we had an organizational framework that was actually very much independent of any one single entity controlling the operations of the overall project. The Linux Foundation has extensive experience in best practices in infrastructure. We've actually created the infrastructure to host dozens of projects, including Open Daylight, including, of course, Open-O, and including many other projects, FDIO that you just saw as well. And then if you look at this on the right-hand side, the portfolio of open source networking projects, you'll see some of the other projects that actually are part of the Linux Foundation portfolio. And then, of course, we added Openstack and Juju in particular, who are not part of the Linux Foundation, just because of the integration that we have with the Open-O platform. And then we're working with reference architectures like ETSI, like MEF. We're working with the open source reference platforms like OPNFV, of course, as well as the Open LSO initiative that you might not have heard about yet, but this is really more focused on a open source reference platform for integration with connectivity services as opposed to the NFV infrastructure that OPNFV has actually been focusing on, even though OPNFV has expanded their charter into orchestration as well, as we'll see next year. And then finally, the Linux Foundation is really all about community building. I mean, we look at the keynote and we see 500 or 600 people in the audience. I mean, it's a really exciting opportunity for any of the leaders of these projects and even participants in these projects to be a part of that community. And Open-O is off to a phenomenal start. We have over 100 developers actually at least committed to the project by our members. And then we have a number of other individuals and organizations that are watching as well. So with that, what I'd like to do is introduce my close colleague, Chris Donley. He's no stranger to this community. He has he's the technical steering committee chair for Open-O. He also was formerly involved on the board of directors of OPNFV. He was a major contributor to Open Daylight, and he was on the advisory board there. He was at Cable Labs, so he represented the cable industry's interest in the open community for years, and has been one of the truly high integrity and extremely effective leaders to get the project off the ground. So, Chris?
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to introduce the Open-O architecture. Mark told you about our value proposition, how we're trying to be service-oriented and support legacy equipment and connectivity services, as well as new and emerging SDN and NFV applications. In order to do that, we have a multi-tier architecture. We start our orchestration services with GSO, Global Service Orchestrator. This provides end-to-end services view and connects up with OSS and BSS systems, as well as operator GUIs and end-user portals. From that, it decomposes the service and hands it off to either SDN-O for connectivity services or NFVO for application services. SDN-O connects up to SDN controllers, as well as to legacy networks, to EMS systems that may be deployed. Also, NFVO connects up to NFVI, the NFV infrastructure, to VNFM, and to a Vim. And we have a set of common services, such as a microservices bus, to connect all the components together, and integration and tools through an extensive integration lab. Open-O is use case driven. We've worked with our membership and particularly our operators to develop and refine a use case that we then use to drive our releases. For our first release, the use case that we're working on is Virtual CPE. And this is for both residential and enterprise sites. It controls both the overlay and underlay networks. We have multiple data centers in this environment. One that's called the TIC core, and another one that's called the TIC edge. We support multiple SDN controllers, including Open Daylight in this environment. We also support Openstack and the full set of data center networking. For release 1, we came together in Beijing back in May for a seed code workshop. 7 different companies brought forward contributions, which we worked into a plan for this first release that we plan to deliver by the end of the year. We have approved 7 different projects that we are currently working on. GSO, SDN-O, and NFVO that I explained previously. Also, a project that we call Yang and Tosca, which is shared between GSO, SDN-O, and NFVO, and provides parser and workflow services, as well as a model designer and a catalog. We also have a set of common services. We have integration, which is ongoing, and we have a new project that we just approved a few weeks ago called VNF SDK. We want to create a common way for packaging and onboarding VNFs and to facilitate a marketplace similar to the Apple App Store or Google Play, where you can create VNFs, package them once, push them into a marketplace, and then have those VNFs downloaded and consumed within Open-O. And within each of these projects, we are committed To member diversity, we have at least 3 companies supporting each one of these projects. We have PTLs, project technical leads, from different companies for these different projects. So there is a wide range of diversity based on company, based on geography. We have people in China, in India, in Ireland, in the US, who are leading projects. And based on gender, half of our PTLs are women. And we are well underway for our first release. We have 7 projects that are currently in progress, 34 different repositories, more than 29,000 files, and more than 2 million lines of code. Not bad for 3.5 months. We're currently working with 125 developers, and we have more information on the wiki. I've included the URL here. And we just passed our M4 code freeze milestone 2 weeks ago, and we are going to hit our RC0 later this week. And we, as Marc mentioned, we want to work actively with many other organizations within the community. We are looking at ETSI, NFVISG, and MEF LSO for architecture and data models. We're working with quite a number of open source projects, including OPNFV, where we have a brand new project called Opera to integrate OpenO with OPNFV, and with Openstack and Open Daylight and ONOS as well, which we use both Open Daylight and ONOS as SDN controllers for the connectivity solutions. And as we develop, we are looking to create common information and data models, and we want to be working with the community to make sure that our interfaces clearly align. And for our initial release, we are integrating with Juju as our VNFM. And with that, we have a few minutes. I'd like to invite questions from the audience.
The relation of OpenO with other similar open source projects like open source Mano or Eco. Are you having any relation with those projects?
We don't have any direct relationships. Of course, this is open source, and so we are looking for opportunities to collaborate. We have spoken with them at various industry events, several Mano workshops, places like ETSI, NFV, especially in areas like the information and data models. There are areas that we can align, but at the same time, we're pursuing different value propositions. Comparing just to OSM, they are more focused on being strictly ETSI Mano compliant, and so they've been more focused on the data center use cases, whereas we also bring in additional focus on connectivity services through both the legacy and the SDN networks. Yes?
What is the main model of the VNF? Like, is it Tosca? Which kind of Tosca?
Yes, we use both Tosca and Yang for our modeling languages. At this point in time, we find that Yang provides better connectivity services modeling, and Tosca provides better end-to-end services. We also support Yang inside of Tosca so that you can create a complicated service that has both the application and the connectivity pieces, and then our parser is able to decompose that and send the models to the correct components. Any other questions? Great. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I hope you check out our wiki and come work with us. We are definitely looking to engage with the Open Daylight community in particularly aligning our interfaces. We think that there's a lot of interesting work happening within Open Daylight on the northbound with the intent interfaces, and we're looking forward to further collaboration as we move forward. Thank you.